one of America's closest allies, fighting for its borders and its security. Local media is reporting the Israeli strikes on targets in a militant stronghold in the West Bank. It is the first major incursion since the 2002 Battle of Jenin during the Second Intifada. At that time, more than 50 Palestinians and 23 Israeli soldiers were killed in just a week of fighting. So the question now, could we be looking at essentially a third intifada? Rabbi, nice to speak to you, sir.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Rabbi, you go back and forth between the United States and here in Israel, right?
Yep, I commute.
How often do you commute?
At least once a month. I'm here for about a week or two here, a week or two back in North America.
All right, that's a long commute.
Yeah.
Where in North America?
All over, you know, a lot in tri-state area, but we cover North America, Latin America. We're up and down the Americas, everywhere you can imagine.
Why do you come here?
We come here because for Jews, this is our heart and soul. This is where we've been for 3,500 years. This is everything is here. So for us, it's really about reaching out to Jews back home and then connecting them here to the land of Israel.
I want to talk to you about anti-Semitism.
Sure.
Growing in the United States or not, or declining, do you think?
It's a growth industry. Always has been, and it's just getting worse now. And people are finding all kinds of excuses to come after the Jews, and it's terrifying, frankly, for the communities back home.
How bad? I mean, give me some examples. How bad is it? Because I mean, I know that I read in the paper even about public high schools in a neighboring county to Washington D.C. have swastika signs. I mean, just incredible things.
You're finding on Shabbat, you're finding people back home in Brooklyn or Manhattan getting beat up on the street. You're finding synagogues where people are waving Nazi swastika flags outside of the synagogues. You're finding it everywhere. A lot of terrifying kind of acts that are of intimidation of Jewish people.
You know, it's like you're obviously an adult. I think about the kids that see that, the Jewish kids who see that.
Yeah, look, for kids, it's hard because then the Jews, what they do is it kills their identity. I don't want to be Jewish. I don't want to get beat up. And so what it does, it kind of kills our religion. It squashes the ability to be a Jew outwardly.
Why? What is going on?
Look, I think, you know, for us, this has been 2,000 years.
I know, but you say that it's increasing. So what's spiking it?
You know, it's hard to say. I think that people are using Israel as an excuse. It's hard to say I don't like Jews. It's a lot easier to say I don't like Jews because of what they're doing to the Palestinians. So I think there's an excuse out there that people can use when they're coming after the Jews, even though they don't really know what's going on here. They don't really understand the dynamics. But I can side with the people against the Jews, and therefore it's a lot easier to be an anti-Semite.
What about here in Israel, anti-Semitism?
In terms of,
yeah, I mean, frankly, I spoke to a couple people and they didn't have very nice things to say. I mean, I thought they were anti-Semitic.
Yeah, look, there's always been an issue. There's always been this wrestling match where people try to make the Israeli army into Nazis, which is absurd considering they killed 6 million Jews, right? There's that kind of pushback against the Jews. Really, the Jews want to live in peace. We came here, we want to be here in peace. All we want is peace, but no one will leave us alone.
All right, but I read a poll, something in fact, almost like 77% of American Jews or something would not support Netanyahu. I mean, a significant number because he's very conservative and he's very law enforcement here in Israel. Is that something? I mean, is that number sort of consistent with how you sort of measure what's going on in America vis-a-vis American Jews vis-a-vis Israel?
Look, I think it's an internal problem for the Jews because so many Jews are not connected to their Judaism. So many Jews have not been to Israel. All they know is also what they're reading in the press. And frankly, the press does a fairly bad job of describing what's going on here. This is a democracy. This is the most vibrant democracy in the Middle East. This is a democracy which for years couldn't form a government and they had constant votes, but they were constantly voting. On the Palestinian side, you have a president that's been there for 18 or 19 years of a 4-year term. This is the democracy of the Middle East. And you can like Netanyahu and not like Netanyahu, but you can't deny the will of the people, and that's the way democracy works.
Some universities want to oppose Israel because of what they call the occupation, the Palestinians, and a lot of the young people, a lot of the young Jews are behind this divestiture movement. They want to get rid of anything that has to do with Israel. Why?
Well, I find it to be anti-Semitism, and it doesn't mean that a Jew can't be anti-Semitic, meaning for Jews to sit there who haven't really been here, don't really understand the dynamics on the ground, for them to just say that and really join everyone else. And everyone else is just, if you go to social media, the people that don't like Jews are doing a phenomenal job at painting us as something we're not. If you walk in here, if you were in the old city, right, there was a tremendous freedom of religion. Christians, Muslims, and Jews all walking around together.
But I don't think they necessarily, I didn't get the sense walking around and talking to some of them, which of course is not scientific enough, but I mean, I heard enough things where it seemed like they were walking along, coexisting, but not particularly liking or being warm to each other or wanting them there.
From 1948 to 1967, if I had walked where my building is, where I work, if I was there as a Jew, I would have been killed. And literally, Jerusalem has always been this city through the Crusades, through the years, where one religion over the other religion has always been there and thrown out everyone else or killed everyone else. Only under the Jewish people, only under the state of Israel, can everyone worship freely. Is it perfect? No, because there's a lot of rabble-rousers and troublemakers out there. But only under the state of Israel have Christians, Muslims, and Jews had access to the old city of Jerusalem.
Role of the United States in Israel, what do you think of it?
Look, I think America is the greatest ally that Israel's ever had. President Truman recognized the state of Israel before anyone else right away. I think it's an important friendship, but America has to understand that Israel has other options as well. And
what are the other options?
The other options, constantly, China is trying to come here constantly, and America is asking Israel to push them off. That happened at the port of Haifa, when China almost took over the port of Haifa. I think
why would Israel turn to China over us?
I think that Israel wants to be with America, but America has to make certain decisions and has to really back us.
Is that sort of a threat? I mean, if it's like if you're not going to go with us, we're going to China.
I'm not a politician, but I can't say that the global world has a lot of options. And the bottom line is, I think America has really beat up Israel in a terrible, terrible way these last bunch of years. And I think they have to start realizing who their friends around the world are.
Beaten up how?
I think that they've come out, the State Department has constantly come out in terms of the West Bank, in terms of all kinds of different, you hear them constantly talking about the judicial, the issues going on here are very much internal.
The judicial reform.
The judicial reform. This is a parliamentary, this is a totally different system than America. I don't think America really understands the system here, yet they've come out in support of one side over the other. And I think it's a huge mistake. Yes, it's messy here because democracy is messy. They're trying to find their way through. America shouldn't be getting involved internally. There's a lot of countries out there that have way worse systems that they never say a word about.
You mentioned the State Department. You said for a long time, does that cross administrations, or is that a particular administration?
It's a particular administration. It depends on the administration which way they go. Generally, unfortunately, under the Democrats, and we have a lot of friends within the Democratic Party, but many times under the Democratic presidents, they're much more critical of Israel. And that it's a huge mistake when you see the rest of the world out there. Really, you're picking on Israel, like the one democracy who's trying to stand for truth and everything good?
Do you think Saudi Arabia is going to join the Abraham Accords?
I absolutely hope so. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, he sees that as his, number one priority going out on top. I very much hope so. I was in Saudi Arabia about 6 months ago. I spent time with them. I think they're ready. They need a little bit of cover to kind of make that jump. But I think where they are business-wise, they're doing a tremendous amount of business with Israel, but a lot of it's kind of under the table. I think they'd like to be above board.
But sort of the irony of it is that they've also reestablished diplomatic ties with Iran, which wants to wipe Israel off the map, as Ahmadinejad, the former president, said. So, I mean, it's sort of hard to understand how, this relationship with Israel and Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is pals now, for lack of a better word, with Iran that wants to wipe Israel off the map.
Yeah, I don't read it as they're pals with Iran. I think China wanted them to play nice, and therefore they played nice. I think Iran is a despicable regime that, frankly, is horrible to their own people, and hopefully that'll change. But I think we're in a tough neighborhood here, and Syria is on one border, Jordan, and there has to be a certain amount of, we're going to try as best as we can not to go to full-out war. Doesn't mean that we love each other. Doesn't mean that there's true peace, but it means that we try and get along as best as we can, so we don't have to fight each other.
Nice to talk to you, sir.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Still ahead, you will go inside the tear tunnels at the Lebanon border. They were built by Israel's enemy, Hezbollah. The purpose? You can imagine that.